You stopped editing your light to be palatable. Now you shine unfiltered. You no longer fear the unknown, because you've met yourself there and you are safe. You stopped shrinking to fit into old spaces. Now, you expand like you were always meant to. You stopped fighting to be chosen. Now you choose you, daily, boldly, completely. Your healing is no longer for applause. It's for alignment. You didn't let go to lose, you let go to live. Now, your hands are open to receive. You stopped translating your silence into guilt. Now silence is sacred. You no longer seek balance, you embody it. Your peace isn't performance, it's power. You outgrew chaos disguised as passion. Now, calm is your love language. You no longer chase meaning, you create it. Every breath is a story. Every step, sacred. You stopped mistaking effort for love. Now, love shows up soft, steady, and sure. You no longer argue with your worth. Now, it leads the room before you even speak. You stopped confusing trauma bonds with deep connections. Now, you know peace is the real intimacy. You stopped making homes out of places meant to be visited. Now, your roots grow where you're received, not just tolerated. You no longer need a mirror to believe in your glow. Your light is felt, not just seen. You stopped apologizing for your clarity. It took too many storms to earn it. You no longer trade your peace for presence. If it costs your calm, it's too expensive. You stopped being a placeholder in other people's stories. Now, you are the author of your own. You no longer mistake noise for importance. Now, you speak when your soul has something to say. You stopped breaking cycles to be good. Now, you break them to be free. You no longer search for yourself in broken mirrors. You've learned wholeness can't be reflected by something shattered. You stopped walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. Now, your peace starts within, even if it disrupts everything around you. You didn't change, you returned to the version of you before the world told you who to be. You no longer explain your evolution. Those meant to walk with you will feel it in your energy. You stopped mistaking exhaustion for accomplishment. Now, rest is part of your revolution. You no longer crave validation, you crave resonance. If it doesn't echo your truth, you release it. You stopped dimming yourself for people still afraid of the light. Now, you shine unapologetically, even if they squint. You no longer wear your wounds like armor. You've healed, and softness became your strength. You stopped chasing alignment in others. You became it, and now the right souls arrive without effort. You no longer ask if you're too much. You ask, are they enough to hold someone like me? You stopped arguing with red flags. Now, you bless them for the warning and walk. You no longer attach to potential, you honor presence. If they aren't showing up, you stop showing up for them. You stopped resenting the mirror for what it showed. Because now you realize it was always offering clarity. You don't avoid your darkness, you integrate it. That's why your light is layered with wisdom. You no longer shrink to be chosen. You expand and let alignment choose you. You stopped negotiating your intuition. Now, its voice is your guide, not your second guess. You no longer mistake peace for boredom. You now understand it's the frequency of your healing. You stopped hoping they'd understand your silence. Now, you give your words to those who listen with their soul. You no longer perform softness to avoid being misunderstood. You speak truth, tender or not. You stopped fearing being too deep. Now, you attract people who can swim. You stopped being addicted to potential in others. Now, you invest only where growth is mutual. You no longer need to explain your absence. Healing requires solitude, not permission. You stopped building your identity around who hurt you. Now, your story is built on who you became. You no longer confuse chaos with connection. Peace became the proof of real love. You stopped editing your dreams for comfort. Now, you dream in full color, even if they don't understand. You no longer perform your pain for compassion. You are seen in your wholeness, not your wounds. You stopped being the savior. Now you are your own sanctuary. You no longer fear endings. You understand now. Every ending births a deeper version of you. You stopped trading your voice for acceptance. Now you speak with thunder, even in whispers. You no longer chase what drains you. You've become magnetic to what mirrors your peace. You stopped wearing your silence like shame. Now it's your boundary and your brilliance. You no longer seek permission to evolve. You evolve in public, in private, in pain, and in purpose. You stopped translating yourself to be digestible. Now you let your truth be your filter. You no longer fear being left behind. You know what's aligned will never need to catch up. You stopped performing humility to make others comfortable. You now wear your power with softness, not apology. You stopped molding yourself into what they needed. Now you embody what you've always been. You no longer compromise your boundaries for connection. You know now, connection without respect is just control. You stopped giving people discounts on your energy. Now, only those who match your depth receive access. You no longer seek to be understood by the shallow. Your depth speaks a language few are fluent in. You stopped carrying emotional debt for people who never invested in you. Now, you are spiritually debt-free. You no longer confuse urgency for importance. You move with intention, not impulse. You stopped apologizing for your expansion. If it makes them uncomfortable, they were never meant to grow beside you. You no longer rush your becoming. Sacred things take sacred time. You stopped building futures in temporary spaces. Now, you wait for foundations before laying bricks. You no longer need applause. Peace is your standing ovation. You stopped defending your growth. The right people will recognize your bloom without explanation. You no longer react, you respond. And that shift changed everything. You stopped giving energy to stories you outgrew. Now, your silence speaks volumes. You no longer pretend you're okay to keep things comfortable. Now, your truth is louder than their comfort. You stopped mistaking mirrors for maps. You don't follow reflection, you follow purpose. You stopped proving yourself to people committed to misjudging you. That freedom is unmatched. You didn't lose your magic. It was just buried beneath performance. Now it dances freely. You no longer apologize for needing space, because space is where your soul breathes. You stopped giving the loudest voices the most access. Now, stillness gets the front row. You no longer let emotions rule you. You let them teach you. Now, every feeling is a sacred message. You no longer translate your soul to people who refuse to listen. That's not cold, that's wise. You stopped being a mirror for others and became a window for yourself. Now you see clearly. You no longer need perfect timing. You are the timing. You move with divine rhythm. You stopped dancing for crumbs. Now, you feast in places that honor your appetite. You stopped chasing loyalty from people who were never loyal to themselves. Now, your circle reflects your worth. You stopped editing your light to be palatable. Now you shine unfiltered. You no longer fear the unknown, because you've met yourself there and you are safe. Your reflection didn't shatter. You outgrew the identity you once clung to. The mirror didn't break you. It freed you. You weren't falling apart. You were falling into alignment. Sometimes, pieces must scatter before they find their sacred place. You were never too broken. You were too big for the boxes they kept trying to put you in. And now, you're becoming uncontainable. The life you thought you wanted was a decoy. The universe interrupted it to give you something real. You didn't fail. You outgrew a version of success that wasn't yours. Redirection is still a reward. You stopped chasing the mirror and started becoming the light. Now reflections find you. They didn't walk away. You rose so high they couldn't breathe in your air. Some departures are divine protection. You didn't lose your sparkle. You buried it under people-pleasing. Now, you dig it out like treasure. Every cracked mirror was a lesson. Stop editing yourself to be digestible. You're not here to be easy. You're here to be true. You stopped looking into mirrors for permission. Now, you walk like you already know. That version of you they miss was your survival suit. You've since become a living soul, not a performance. You no longer fit their reflection. That's not arrogance, it's evolution. Your mask cracked the day your truth got louder than your fear. Now the world hears you. The old mirror shattered, not to hurt you, but to show you you've changed. And that's your miracle. You didn't break, you broke free. There's a difference. And your life is proof. You weren't too much. You were simply in rooms too small. So the mirrors broke to make space. Your shadow didn't disappear, it integrated. You became whole, not perfect. You didn't stop loving. You stopped leaking. Now, your love is poured with intention, not desperation. That mirror was never honest. It only showed what the world trained you to see. Your soul knew better. You stopped recognizing yourself because you finally became someone you respect, not someone they molded. You didn't lose your identity. You peeled off layers of expectation. What's left is raw, real, radiant. The person you're becoming scares the systems that benefit from your silence. Good. Let them tremble. You didn't become heartless. You learned self-preservation. There's power in protecting your peace. That silence you feared, it was your rebirth room. Now, your whispers shake worlds. You stopped asking the mirror who you are. Now, your life answers for you. The moment the mirror cracked, your story began. A story of unbecoming everything untrue. You didn't betray your past. You honored your future. And it thanked you with freedom. You stopped fighting for belonging and built your own home. Now, you are both the key and the door. The cracks weren't flaws, they were light entries. Now, you glow from places that once bled. You outgrew reflections. Now, you move with vision. You didn't run away. You walked away from what never truly saw you. And in doing so, you finally saw yourself. You stopped shrinking your soul to be invited into rooms with no windows. Now, you build your own home, with sunlight and space. Your truth didn't ruin the relationship. It revealed it. Truth always shows you what's real. You weren't hard to love. You were just asking for a depth they weren't ready to swim in. And that's not rejection, it's redirection. Your healing won't be understood by those who benefit from your wounds. Let them misunderstand. You weren't made for their comfort. You didn't change too much. They just stopped controlling the narrative. You're finally the author now. Your silence wasn't passive, it was powerful. It held the weight of all the times you finally chose yourself. You stopped waiting for them to clap. Now you dance without a stage, because joy doesn't need an audience. The person they miss isn't gone. She's just no longer available for pretending. She retired the mask. Every exit you made was a sacred initiation. You didn't just leave, you evolved. Your softness didn't disappear, it got wise. Now, it's wrapped in boundaries and bathed in discernment. The mirror never lied. It was just too small to hold who you're becoming. Now you reflect galaxies. You no longer crave loud love, you crave safe love. The kind that whispers, you're already enough. The more you healed, the less you needed to be seen. Because peace doesn't perform, it simply is. You stopped seeking answers and started embodying them. Now, you live the questions out loud. They couldn't see your growth because it wasn't loud enough to impress them. But growth isn't noise, it's stillness. You didn't give up, you gave in to alignment. You surrendered force and gained flow. Your boundaries weren't walls, they were windows with locks. You decide who gets access to the light. You stopped begging for belonging when you became your own home. Now home walks with you. Your presence used to seek approval, now it just exists. Fully, boldly, unapologetically. You stopped blaming the mirror when you realized your reflection was ready for change. Now, change greets you like a friend. You outgrew identities that were never rooted in truth. Shedding them wasn't ego, it was evolution. You no longer seek clarity in confusion. You found peace in the pause, and the pause became your teacher. You stopped chasing closure. Now you live like someone who closed the door and locked it with love. Your new life cost you your old one. And that's the best deal you ever made. You no longer break to be relatable. Now, your strength offends the places where you once hid. You stopped being addicted to survival when peace became your new baseline. Now, rest is your revolution. They didn't betray you, they revealed themselves. And in that revelation you were rescued. You stopped watering gardens that never bore fruit. Now, you plant in places where your soul can eat. You became the mirror. And suddenly, everything reflected back to you had meaning. You stopped being afraid of outgrowing people. Now, you see it as evidence of healing. Your detachment wasn't coldness, it was clarity. You finally saw what wasn't growing you. You don't chase anymore. You attract by being what you once begged for. You no longer romanticize struggle. Now, ease is your sacred standard. Your joy is no longer conditional. It's anchored in who you are, not what you get. You didn't become selfish, you became self-honoring. And that distinction saved your life. Your solitude isn't loneliness, it's healing time. You stopped fearing your own company. You no longer measure love by intensity, you measure it by safety. Now, chaos no longer feels like chemistry. You stopped being impressed by effort that came without consistency. Now, alignment trumps attraction. You don't fear being misunderstood. You fear self-abandonment more. And that keeps you grounded. You stopped proving yourself to people committed to misjudging you. That freedom is unmatched. You didn't lose your magic. It was just buried beneath performance. Now it dances freely. You no longer apologize for needing space. Because space is where your soul breathes. You stopped giving the loudest voices the most access. Now, stillness gets the front row. You no longer let emotions rule you. You let them teach you. Now, every feeling is a sacred message. You no longer translate your soul to people who refuse to listen. That's not cold, that's wise. You stopped being a mirror for others and became a window for yourself. Now you see clearly.